if Professors Liu and Monsieur mentioned that we also webcast, or they did talk about it, it's a webcast, which is why I'm holding this microphone. It does not project. And there is a microphone up there that will capture your questions for the people watching both live and archived on the web. My name is Professor Jennifer Dill. I am doing the introduction today because I invited today's speaker to come here. Our speaker today is Mohja Rhoads. She received her PhD from the University of Southern California in Policy Planning and Development, and a master's in planning from my alma mater, UCLA, so go Bruins. I don't know who you root for when they play each other. That's a big rivalry. Her research interests include the nexus between information communication technologies and transportation, as well as using big data to answer old transportation questions in new ways, which will be part of today's talk, and transportation and land use in a neighborhood context. She's currently a senior research associate for the South Bay Cities Council of Governments and a research fellow at the Price School of Public Policy at USC. And as a fun little aside, she plays the ukulele. But I don't think you have it with you right now.
I don't.
So you'll have to catch her at another time for that. We do ask that you hold questions until the end. We should have plenty of time at the end, and I'm going to turn it over to Mohja.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Professor Dill. Once again, my name is Mohja Rhoads, recently minted PhD from USC. I will be talking about an application from a program. It's been a 4-year program, an archive data management database, ADMS, and holds about 4 years worth of data. I'll discuss that later. This paper is one of the applications from this database. And this project is the brainchild of Professor Genevieve Giuliano. She's my advisor. And Sandeep and I have been the research assistants on this project. Sandeep took the lead on this application. I took the lead on another application. And these applications in this paper demonstrate the usefulness of archived data. So an overview of the presentation, I'll first be discussing big data, the new opportunities in big data. I'll discuss our study application, which looks at the new light rail transit line in Los Angeles, and I'll end with some conclusions. So big data, new opportunities. Big data is a buzzword these days. Big data is resulting from a mixture of intelligent in the transportation context, a mixture of intelligent transportation systems and ICT. We're all carrying phones. They're tracking what we're doing. We have data coming in from sensors along roads, along freeways, cameras. And now we have the ability to store this data and work with this data. It's software, new software. And so it provides great new opportunities in terms of transportation model calibration, in terms of real-time transportation management, and so forth and so on. The research possibilities from big data are really, they're kind of endless. So ADMS, it's a project funded by Los Angeles Metro. We've been archiving data for about 4 years. I think 4 years will be the total, 3 or 4 years. The mechanics of the database has been created by the USC Integrated Media Systems Center by the computer scientists there. And us at the Price School, through MedTrans, we have been managing how to use these data, how to show planners how we can use archive data. So the ADMS for Los Angeles is really unique. There's nothing out there like it right now. We have data for multiple modes. Transit, arterials, the highway system. We have a variety of devices, and we combine information from a variety of agencies, and we have multiple data types. And there's really nothing like that, like this out there right now. We're getting information from many sensors, highway sensors, arterial sensors. We're getting information at 30 seconds for thousands of sensors. Some information is coming in at the minute, and some is coming in at the year. We have freeway detectors, arterial detectors. We have CCTV. We have event data, accidents ramp metering data, freeway travel times, and we have a series of transit data as well, bus data, GPS devices on bus, we have patronage data, so forth and so on. So once again, we're really talking about big data. With 20 data feeds, 2,000 highway sensors within Los Angeles County, and around 5,000 arterial sensors, incident reports, transit vehicle, GPS systems, and patronage. The data volume is around 7 megabytes per minute and about 4 terabytes per year. I like to have metaphors when these numbers are, because they don't mean that much to me, but 7 megabytes per minute is equivalent to 7 500-page books. That's coming in at every minute to our database. It's also around 5 floppy disks as a metaphor. About 4 terabytes per year is equivalent to listening to Pandora nonstop for 7.4 years, or around 1.6 million 500-page books. So we're really talking about big data. And I'd like to pause for a second. Big data is our environment, and it's going to continue to be our environment. So I really do encourage students in the schools of planning to take some programming courses. I think it would really enhance your appeal as an employee. The ability to work in this domain and understand this domain is very, very important. So it's important that planners can interact with computer scientists. And you might make a lot of money doing that as well. ADMS is also continuously expanding. So more and more data is coming in. So Professor Giuliano really loves this slide. This shows the value of our data. Our data are really coming in at the origin. They're coming in by the second, and they're coming in at specific locations. And the other data sources that planners, transportation planners use, census data, HPMS, gasoline data, transit ridership, they vary at levels of aggregation. So the ADMS really can be expanded to meet any of these other data sources. So the purpose of our applications and to show the utility of data management systems, to date there are very few examples of using big data in urban planning. And so our purpose is to show planners how we can use these data. And they can be used in a variety of ways. We look at impacts. We look at a light rail investment. And the second application, which is the one that I led, is looking at regional monitoring. It's looking at how to monitor the region in a variety of time periods and aggregations. So, as I said, this application that I'm discussing looks at the new light rail transit line in Los Angeles. The purpose of light rail investments is obvious. It's to provide more service, attract more patronage, through that perhaps take people out of their cars, reduce congestion, reduce air pollution. Self-evident why we promote transit and why we invest in transit. So what we may know from the literature, and actually I should rephrase this, we don't know that much. The literature is inconclusive as to whether light rail transit investment generates more patronage or whether it influences urban farm. Literature is mixed, so we actually don't know that much about light rail investment. So this should be stated as what we've studied. What we haven't studied is light rail transit impact on congestion within a corridor. So this is an image of the Expo Line in Los Angeles. I want to talk a little bit about corridor and looking at a corridor. When we think of a transit corridor, it's not just one system. It's the integration of all the systems. So we have to think about it in terms of the integration of the arterial system, the highway system, pedestrian system, and the transit system, the bus system. So when we analyze a corridor, we should be analyzing all of its components and how they interact. So the Expo Line is a new line, and well, it's a couple of years old now, but it's a new line in Los Angeles. Its purpose is to link downtown to the west side. This is phase 1. Phase 2 continues from Culver City to the west side. It's all the way to the beach, essentially. So phase 1 runs from downtown through USC, through my school, and ends in Culver City. And we look at the entire corridor, which I will explain in a second. The Expo line was intended, I should back up. Right north, we have a highly congested highway, the I-10, and we have various congested arterials as well. So the purpose of the Expo line was to potentially alleviate some of the severe congestion that the I-10 sees in surrounding arterials, and to improve access and mobility throughout the corridor, to get to provide people with a service south of the I-10 connections to downtown and vice versa. So the question this paper attempted to answer is, has the line actually generated more transit use? And secondly, has it improved mobility and reliability within the corridor? We conducted a quasi-experimental design. So if we were just to look at the corridor in question and say, oh, yes, transit increased, speeds increased, well, what happened if that also happened somewhere else, and that's just purely because of the economy or some other reason? So we have to compare the corridor of interest to another corridor, and that's the experimental versus control. And we do a before and after comparison, before the light rail was introduced and afterwards. So this is, the green is the experimental corridor, as I said, including the light rail. We include the highway, the 110, some arterials to the north and south, and we have two control corridors as well. One to the west of the experimental control corridor and one to the north. And the one to the north sort of simulates the same flow. So the before period, we take 3 months in the before period and we take 3 months in the post period. We look at the time period from November to January, and then a year, that's before the light rail was operational. And we look at three months, the same 3 months a year later. We have a host of transit information, bus and rail information from Metro, Los Angeles Metro, shape files, locations of lines, planned service changes, boardings and alightings for each of the bus routes. And in terms of arterial and highway, there are about 74 sensors in that entire area, and about 1,000 arterial sensors. For that period of time, this equates to about 16 million readings and 108 million readings for the arterial.
When did the line open?
That's a very good question, and I'm sorry. but it opened, it hadn't just opened, so we gave it a little bit of time before it opened. But I'm so sorry. I'll have to get back to you on that. But it was sometime before the period we tested. These are the this table looks at the total number of sensors and possible hypothetical readings. So if every sensor were to work every 30 seconds, the way it's supposed to, we would have around 19 million highway sensor read observations and about 300 million arterial observations. Now, I think the numbers that we ran is about 50% of sensors work at any given time. So half of the sensors don't work. And then we do a host of cleaning to the data. We filter for bad days because there are days when sensors don't work. There are time periods when sensors don't work. We filter for incorrect readings. So say speed is positive, but volume and occupancy was 0. That's an impossible outcome. So we do some filtering for incorrect data. And in the end, the data that we actually are available to work with at these 30-second intervals is around 42 to 30% of the total possible observations available. Now, we don't work with 30-second readings because there's too much variation, too much variability. We aggregate to the 15-minute level. And once again, after that same process, bad days, bad sensors, the percent of missing data is around 40% for the highways and around 25 to 15% for the arterials. So the results, these are now getting into the results of what we studied. So the first question, has the Metro line had a significant, has the Expo line had a significant impact on transit ridership? We looked at 4 different aspects of transit ridership. We looked at average daily total weekday patronage before and after. We look at the east-west transit lines, bus lines that would run in the same way as the light rail. We look at AM and PM peak, and we look at transfers around the new Expo line stops. And we have accounted for all transit changes. Some bus lines were modified. A note on screen lines. When we look at the east-west bus routes, they had to pass through these certain screen lines in order to mimic the same type of flow as the light rail transit line. So for that first average daily total weekday travel, we do see evidence that transit ridership did increase. Now, we don't have the change in rail because obviously the rail wasn't there in the pre-period. But for the experimental area, patronage increased by about 6%. It increased by about 3% in the west area, in the west control area as well, which might indicate that actually some new riders are taking the lines that feed into the light rail. In the north area, transit ridership decreased by about 4%. So we do see evidence that transit ridership increased. But however, we do have to there's a caveat because revenue hours also did increase during the post period. Once again, a little bit more evidence that the ridership did increase. In the AM and peak, we see a substantial increase in ridership in the experimental area and a decreased ridership in some of the control when just looking at AM and PM peak travel. And we see some significant increases in transfers around some of in transfers around some of the major stops. La Cienega, Jefferson is a major stop along the Expo line, and we see a very substantial increase in transfers at the bus stops nearby the light rail. And the question is are these new riders being pulled from the bus? Are they bus riders that were riding other lines and they're simply just replacing they're using a new mode? Or are they actually coming out of the automobile? Are they leaving their auto at home and taking transit? And we see evidence for both. So the conclusion is that the light rail does seem to have a positive impact on transit use. Which does indicate that there is latent demand for high-quality transit service. And there is evidence suggesting mode substitution for both from bus to light rail and from auto to light rail. So now we're looking at the other components of a corridor, arterial and highway system. Has the light rail line had an impact on both of these systems? We look at the three different systems. We look at the I-10 highway. We look at Venice Boulevard, which is it's a road that very much mimics the light rail line. And we also look at other east-west arterials. The performance measures we use are corridor speed, average speeds, and travel time reliability. That is, how predictable is my travel time? How big or how little is the variation with day-to-day travel time? We're looking at the 2 peak periods, AM peak and PM peak. AM peak is from 7 to 10 a.m. PM peak is from 4 to 7 p.m. And we used t-tests, and we also use what's called a difference in difference estimator approach. Essentially, it's a traditional regression line, and with focusing on this coefficient, and it is the difference before and after of the experimental area minus the difference before and after in the control area. And what we'd like to look at whether or not this coefficient is of high magnitude and whether or not it's significant. So there's two ways we did the analysis: simple t-tests and then this difference in difference approach. So the first set is looking at the impact on the highway. The green is within the experimental segment, and the pink is within the control. And we don't really see much of an impact on speeds on the highway. And that's kind of obvious because we're talking about two very different scales. We're talking about a highway sees hundreds, thousands of passengers a day, which light rail will never see. So that's intuitive. And the same thing, the difference in difference approach really didn't come up with significant coefficients of high magnitude in the regression. So now looking at Venice Boulevard, which is the green arterial in the experimental corridor, and the pink in the control. And here we do see a little bit of an impact on speeds. We see a decrease in speeds in the experimental portion versus the control. Slightly dubious. There was a lot, in my opinion, there was a lot of construction going on the entire time in both the experimental portion and then afterwards in the control. And it's in my opinion that it's the elimination of a lot of this. It's the elimination and the addition of a lot of this construction that may result in lower speeds. But nonetheless, we've seen lower speeds in the experimental portion, and that also may be due to pulling out some riders from their autos, some travelers from their autos. And we also see evidence in the difference in difference coefficient. Same thing in terms of the arterial with reliability. We're seeing tighter and more predictable travel times in the arterial portion, and same thing within the so this figure looks at the different arterials sort of in line, and we're seeing the greater better travel time reliability and better speeds in arterials that are closer to the line. So in conclusion, there has been the light rail line in using the ADMS data to observe an impact of light rail transit investment. We have seen evidence of increased transit use. Caveat, service did increase as well. And this probably is explained by a shift from bus, a little bit of shift from bus from rail, and also probably a shift from auto to transit as well. In terms of the corridor, the other systems in the corridor and system performance, we really didn't see any impact on the I-10. That's intuitive, much larger scale. But we did see some evidence of increased speeds and better reliability within the arterial systems, which may be explained by travelers switching from auto to transit. So the significance and the limitations of this study, we've demonstrated how big transportation system data can be used to analyze an investment and at a very refined scale. Data limitations do exist. We had some pockets of arterials that did not have sensors. So we need better instrumentation, and there's always a problem with interagency coordination. There's data that we can't get from certain agencies, et cetera. And our story is incomplete because the best way to perform this analysis would really be to look at throughput, person throughput, how many people per vehicle are traveling, pedestrian throughput, et cetera, to look at the entire person throughput through a corridor. These data are very hard to come by, but that is the ultimate way to measure, to perform this type of analysis. However, we have developed a framework on how to utilize big data to answer some of these questions on investment and so forth. Conclusions on using big data. Big data most definitely has the potential to improve the monitoring and analysis of major projects. Highly detailed across time and space and can be aggregated or disaggregated to your interests. And now that we have this set in place, we can now perform the same type of analysis for a longer period of time or for different periods of time, and we will be doing another 3-month analysis. We will be adding another 3 months of data. We will be performing another 3 months analysis on another 3 months of data very soon. But big data has a variety of problems, mainly in the form of non-functioning sensors, missing data, bad days, et cetera. And really, this is, I think, the key. Using it requires programming in database. So it's one thing I forgot to mention when I had the big data slide with the metaphors of big data is, you know it's big data when it doesn't work in any of your programs. So it doesn't work in Excel, doesn't work in Access, doesn't work in Stata, doesn't work in SPSS. And that's very frustrating. So it's absolutely essential to have SQL skill, to have database skills, which we've had to learn, and it's been wonderful. And we've also had to effectively communicate and work with computer scientists. So yes, LA Metro funded this project. These are acknowledgments. Cyrus and Ugor are with the IMSC team. They're the computer scientists. And Udit, he's now working for Yahoo, but he was the student that helped us with a lot of these analysis. So thank you.
Population or ridership pools of like the watershed where people are coming from.
Sure.
How do you envision using some of that?
I think the ultimate goal of this database is to incorporate all these other data sources as well. So census data, any existing data sources. The eventual goal is to combine it all into one database system. So you could easily, undertake analyses. Because all of this is location, we have the geolocation of all of this information. We work with census data. We work with other these types of data through GIS and whatnot. But the eventual goal would be to put pretty much everything together in a one-stop shop.
How do you envision connected vehicles as contributing to the quality of the data? Are you really excited about it, or do you feel kind of like, well, that's just too far down the road for me to really...
Connected vehicles, you mean like self-driving vehicles? No.
Well, connected vehicles on the way to self-driving vehicles.
How do I envision it? I mean, in terms of data, I think the more data, the better is definitely always the way to go. There's many caveats. It's a large learning curve, so more is not necessarily always better, until you've reached that learning curve. I think my opinion on connected vehicles is a good one. I think it's a promising way to go. I don't know if I answered your question.
So regarding the unreliability of sensors,
Yeah.
do you feel that there's a sense that this is just the way things will always be, or do you think they might be improved over time?
That's a very good question. So like I said, this is, there are other examples of archive data management system. PEMS is a good one. So there are other entities out there that have been archiving highway data. However, like I said, this is the first undertaking of this kind. And one of the things that it has done is inform Los Angeles Metro of their data. So we're able to tell them these are the sensors that are, I mean, they know what they know which ones aren't working. But this process has allowed Metro to discover a lot of things about their own data as well, especially in terms of the arterial data. So the ultimate goal for LA Metro would also be to use this information effectively to better instrument their region.
Assistant professor in the School of Urban Studies and Planning here. So what was going on with the bus ridership? Were they? Was I reading that right? That buses were decreasing, but overall transit was going up?
It was increasing. I can go back to that slide. Let's see. No, yeah, it's back. Yes, so it increased for the bus ridership increased in the post period for the control area, so that's the west area, decreased for the experimental and control area. So some of this ridership is new. I think the control area west, I think you are seeing a little bit more ridership because it's feeding into the transit line. But some of this rail ridership is being pulled from the bus system.
And did the bus routes change at all because of the allergy?
They changed, but we incorporated that change. But yes, there were some route changes.
And do you have a sense of like who that impacted and how they then?
Not necessarily. Yes, we do know that, and I don't know if we went that detailed in this round, but. Yes, I don't. Yes, I cannot answer that question. But they are being pulled. They are being pulled from the bus. Riders are being pulled from the bus system.
What are the possibilities for bringing in cell phone data to track that person per person? Is that a good enough substitute variable? Can we safely assume that enough people have cell phones to kind of use that as a substitute? Are there privacy issues involved?
There are a lot. There are some entities that are using cell phone data already as probe data to determine, give route information and speed information. This is not my level of expertise, but I think any cell phone user enters into a contract that they're being tracked, so they know that they're being tracked and they're willing to share their information. But yes, and I'm not sure LA Metro is on track to obtaining that data. It would definitely be ultimate and optimal but there are other sources out there that are actually using. Google is using cell phone data for travel times and routes. INRIX, I think, is the company that, INRIX is the company that uses the mobile data.
So I had two questions. One is whether if you can comment a little bit about the level of the quality of service between bus and rail and the freeway, whether or not there were changes in quality. For example, what is the frequency of the rail compared to the bus? Because I've never ridden the bus or taken the rail in LA before. Yeah. And the second question is whether you can comment a little bit about how you guys chose the comparison or the control corridors, especially the west part, which doesn't necessarily mirror.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. Rail is much more reliable and faster than the bus system. The Expo Line comes every 10 minutes. I don't know how quite to answer this question, but the I-10 is it's a very, very congested highway system. So I would say I think actually we have it as, it's rated as quality F. So it's very poor quality in terms of highway systems. But yes, the rail is more reliable and faster than the bus routes, and it comes about every 10 minutes. And then the second part of your question. Oh yeah. Okay. So one of the problems is instrumentation. So some of these, like I said, there's some pockets that don't have sensors. So we chose the north because it does have a rail line, and it does move in the same, it has the same flow. So we wanted to choose an area that did have a rail line and mimics sort of the same flow. And the west we chose because this will be part 2 of the extension will continue into part 2. And we had to choose it in a way where there was instrumentation, proper instrumentation, and then the arterial system did function in some sort of a parallel way so that we could compare roads.
Give us some examples of policy recommendations you would make based on this analysis.
Oh. Policy recommendations. Fix the detectors. Make them more consistent and ubiquitous. The application that I took the lead on, which is regional monitoring, we had to develop a whole system that weights the speeds appropriately because you really have pockets of LA County that have no sensors at all. And so when you get sensor when you do get sensor readings, it tends to just inform you of the most dense areas and the most congested areas because that's what planners are the most interested in. I think this is the way to go, archive data management systems.
Sensor type.
Uh-huh.
What does it mean for transportation policy? What does it mean for planning practice?
This is a way. This is very much a way to inform policy and practice. This is a way to understand how additions and how investments affect the system and it's a way to understand whether or not certain interventions have been successful in a level of detail that we've never been able to see before. We've never been able to look at how a corridor functions, and this is and how light rail or transit affects the corridor as a whole, its different components.
Maybe building off of that.
Yeah.
Given your findings about congestion and your positive finding, you sounded a little doubtful of.
Well, yeah. So I think this has been a case. This has definitely been a case for transit because we have seen an increase in transit usage, and it's also servicing an area that's greatly in need. So I think in the case of this has really been positive in the case of transit. It has also been positive in the terms of congestion. We've definitely been able to see an increase in speeds, but we do need to run a little bit more analysis to see how much it was the construction that affected the speeds.
And let's say you do that analysis of construction, you can't attribute it to construction,
right?
And really didn't have much impact on congestion.
Along the arterial system.
Yeah, and definitely not on the freeway.
Definitely not, and that's not expected.
I was picturing construction that caused delays, but are you referring to construction that increased capacity?
Well, this line was being built, so there was a lot of construction going on while the line was being built, and now it's being. Right, and now it's being built. Phase 2.
Affected motor vehicle travel on base materials. You mean that the construction
Elimination. No, this construction slowed people down in the pre-period. Right. That's just one of the many hypotheses. It could also be that there have been enough people being pulled out of their cars that has alleviated congestion.
So you would have needed, just in the research design, you would have needed a pre-period before construction. That
That's right. And we did, so I don't want to dwell on that. We did actually try to incorporate a lot of the information that we had on construction. So we did try to, and we didn't see, what we have are maybe like, events, we knew what intersection was being worked on at the time. So we did try to incorporate that. But now we're going to do another 3 months. So if we find increased speeds, then it can't be attributed to.
It struck me the 3 months you chose, and I'm guessing it was because of sort of the timing of the research project and the start of the project. It covered December, which is normally a period where you would sort of avoid doing any sort of analysis of travel during that holiday season.
Yeah.
So.
And part of the problem is that our data did not actually become stable in the database until a certain period. So I think we would have wanted to go before, but it didn't become stable.
Very interested in the planning tool, and I think one of the questions we're asking is, has your data given you enough now to recommend a policy decision rather than demonstrate to us this is great?
Right, yeah.
But are you ready to say we need to invest more like rail lines or something like that? But my real question is can this be used in a looking forward sense? So you say 10, 15 years down the line, we know there's going to be more cars or maybe more population or people living in different neighborhoods, and so capacity issues, other things will change. And so not only does it help you understand right now, but can it help you understand if the system is going to be changing because of demographics or other sort of things, that this system might even help you better be able to plan for the future and how differential patterns here might affect your transportation plan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think once, moving forward, we will incorporate more of the demographics, and I think absolutely you could build models that would predict the, I mean, we have, the level of data is really there, absolutely. And, this could be used, this type of a model could also be used to study the effectiveness of hot lanes, HOV lanes, pretty much the effect of the economy, effect of gasoline prices, effect of, so it's really fluid in the sense that it can be used very richly.
There's some other hands.
Sure.
Is it typical to only use 30 to 40% of the data?
Yes. I mean, well, typical, I don't know, because there's not many examples of these. But yeah, but around over 50% of the sensors permanently fail. So, yeah.
I think he's misunderstood something. Because you didn't throw away 70% of the
No,
data.
we didn't throw it away. Yeah, just right.
Could have been gathered, it wasn't actually collected.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So it was more your throwaway rates were more like a few percent.
That's right. The actual data that we lost due to cleaning was marginal, very marginal compared to that's just data was not there. And also you have bad days. So you have days where all sensors are out and so forth. Yep.
Robert Shabler, you said at one point that the revenue hours increased post-period.
Yeah.
I was curious what exactly that meant.
It means more service. There's more service. Because of the transit line, because of the light rail line, there's more service available.
So someone mentioned capacity a minute ago, and that's kind of been sticking with me while we've gone through this. How did you guys approach questions of capacity and demand while assessing the differences and the changes throughout time here?
Can you rephrase your question?
Well, you should be an expectation that the population is going to change through the course of a year. How did you guys approach handling the change of population and demand on I-10?
Okay, well, we didn't really cover that in detail. That would be a future analysis. Yeah.
Michelle Poirot with Jarrett Walker and Associates. With regards to the revenue hours increasing, did you look at ridership per revenue hour?
I'm not sure whether Sandeep would be a better person to ask. I'm not sure whether we did. We performed hundreds and hundreds of analyses and just kept a few because we couldn't. But I could address that question later.
Pat Miller. So this is backing up a little bit. So I would imagine that a project like this was contested in some way in LA by different groups.
Oh, the light rail?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So can you say a little bit about how your data might have proved certain people right or wrong, or are there other things that other actors may have wanted you to look at, like community groups or something, right?
Yeah. There's definitely the bus folks want more bus.
So what would you say to that?
I would say that this actually also probably encourages bus use as well. We saw a great increase in transfers. We also saw, like I said, more bus ridership in this area. So that means people are actually hopping on the buses to get to the light rail. And in terms of travel time reliability, I mean, it's actually my colleague Sandeep. That's mainly the work that he does is with travel time reliability, and people do really, it's one of the reasons why rail is very successful is because it's a lot more reliable. So you are improving the level, you are promoting you are improving the transportation system for, and downtown LA is an employment center as well as the West Side. So you are providing a more reliable system for people to get to jobs, and it's a very interesting area. The demographics are very interesting. In this area, but I think overall you are providing a service.
If you were to accumulate all the person hours that were put into the research from getting to these conclusions, you had an idea of how much that is, roughly about how much person hours did it take to get from concept, pardon me?
A to B.
Yeah, A to B.
Yeah.
Yep.
Many hours. So we started this 4 years ago. I think the paper has fully been written. It's been about 6 months to a year. Sandeep and I have been working about 20 hours per year. We also had a computer scientist working about 20 hours per week. So I would say a couple of years of 20 hours per week, and then a lot of the time Professor Giuliano has put into it. Many man hours. I mean, it's a bit of a learning curve, so we can go about doing this again much more rapidly. The beginning was very overwhelming. And we have, this is the value of the system is the experience that we've gained. But in the beginning, this is an absolute learning curve. And I think if I were to give a takeaway, it would be to learn some code and have your organizations learn how to work in this environment.
Actually, I have a question specific to that on the SQL side. I'm assuming that you aren't developing the database yourself, but you need to know enough to.
Right. So we had So the computer science. There's two teams. There's the planners. There's the folks at Price School, and then there's the computer science team. And yes, they've built the database, but in order to pull data from, and it's in Oracle, in order to pull data from this database, you have to know SQL, and it's so large that it's not like you can take it and store it in Excel. So you build another little database, and then you parse it up and chunk it up, and then analyze it in platforms. But yes, SQL is, and also learning how to operate Oracle.
I don't know if you mentioned, but you're not supposed to mention Oracle in the statement.
I apologize.
But I do have one more question. You mentioned that there's nothing out there right now, no similar research out there right now. Are you aware of, has anybody contacted you about similar research that they've since started doing, mirroring your research?
I will be attending actually another conference in DC where there's some other big data applications. And there's been, I attended a conference in Chile a couple of years ago where researchers in Chile and researchers in Quebec are using GPS data on buses, which is, it's so problematic I can't even begin to explain, but these are also big data systems. So they're learning how to work with the big data, smooth it, clean it, use it. In Quebec, they're using TAP. TAP data are now starting to be used in many more applications. But it's still sort of, it's still, not many know about this certain our research, but so we're trying to promote it.
Is your group, or do you know of any others locally who are going to use a similar approach to evaluate the bus lane improvements on Wilshire?
Not that I'm aware of, but slowly but surely the agencies are understanding what we're doing and would like. I know that there's interest in using it to evaluate the hot lane because LA has had hot lanes in operation last year.
To the beach, do you expect to see significant changes in the data?
I do, personally, because there has been first of all, when we talk about LA is large. So, it's not like New York City, fit 3 New York cities in it. So regional travel is really difficult, but there's no rapid line, there's no rail line that links. I mean, Wilshire Boulevard is the most traveled corridor, I think, might be in the United States or west on the West Coast, very, very highly traveled corridor. So there's great demand to link. I think I take the bus all the time. It takes an hour plus for me to get from one end to the other. So I would expect significant improvements, significant changes in the data.
And just one other question about it. Because the Expo Line passes through like USC and Staples Center, is there going to be a look at special event days? And how
there was actually. I just attended an event on Saturday, last Saturday, and I was actually very impressed that it was very systematic to the Nokia Center. So there were trains running. I think it was probably every 2 minutes to funnel the audience members out of the Staples Center and out of Nokia. So it's definitely being used for events, also for USC events. And I've seen, because I've been writing the Expo Line a lot, I've seen actually great change happening in the latter part of the year, much, much more ridership, a lot of students. So I think it'll be interesting to see the new wave. We'll probably even find a higher increase in transit ridership as more and more people are informed and understand how to use the system. And I've already visually seen it.
But I'm not going to wrap it up.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.